Welcome back, everybody. So today we're going to talk about the universal challenges for compliance officers in 2025. And for this, I have invited Leanne to speak with us because Leanne is client or customer success manager. Over 4 years, you speak with compliance officers daily. And yeah, we're looking forward to hear from you. Yeah, what kind of struggles do you hear basically that your clients are bringing up, and what concerns do they have for the year of 2025? What keeps them busy?
So when our clients and mostly our compliance officers come to us, at the moment they have questions about the supply chain management, for instance. How can they get the data that they need for their annual reporting? But also how can they collect data in a way that local users, local compliance officers also enter it into the system so that they have an annual reporting that makes sense. If you look at the CSR Triple D, it's a very big issue for clients to think, hey, how can I collect data that gives me a report? And at the end of the year, without having to stress at the end of the year, I have to still chase all my local compliance officers to fill it in. That's something that we see a lot.
So does it mean that because of all these additional ESG activities, it's being pushed to compliance officers, and there's now more expectations for them and more challenges to get their data sets in order? Is that the direction that we're going with this?
Yeah, data is super important, but I speak to compliance officers on a daily basis, and it's more about we have all these trends, all these legislations, and all these demands from the markets. How can we make sense of this? Because you can write a law, you can say, or the board can say, we have to be compliant with XYZ, but then there are very practical things when you have to implement it. And then we try to help the compliance officers, at least that's why I like my job so much, is to, okay, we have to solve this together. What do other clients do of yours? What can we configure to help and to make our lives easier? So that's what I help them with. And I think for this upcoming year, another thing is AI, that clients, they do want to have a lot of extra help because there's already so much work. And I speak to compliance officers mainly in the scope of SpeakUp software, but I know that's just one small part of their tasks that they have to do. AI could help them, but also they have questions, like they also have to explain to IT or internal stakeholders, is it safe? But also how could it make their lives easier?
Yeah, so AI is basically a double-edged sword or challenge for them. So they see AI as a thing that can help them, but they have to focus on how can it be compliant for us as a compliance team. Yeah. But also they are looked at as, hey, how can we make sure that the entire organization is using AI in a suitable way? And that's, of course, quite challenging because these tools are readily available for everybody and very low barrierly available, and there's a lot of risk with sensitive information being entered in these kind of tools, of course.
Martijn, you're more on the sales side. What questions do you get on AI? What are the fears of?
That's a good point. So I think from the side when we're presenting AI, most of the time is the concern, sounds great that it can help so much. What does it do to our data? Is it not learning on our data? And these kind of challenges, because then that makes total sense, because when we're talking about case management and whistleblowing type of data, you do not want an AI to take away learnings from that and start using that in other areas of this AI realm. And of course, we make sure that doesn't happen, but there are quite a number of hoops to go through to make organizations comfortable with that decision, right? Because I think for a lot of organizations, especially the generative AI, the new AI that everybody's talking about now, that is quite new. And organizations are seeking the right ways to assess whether a specific AI solution tool is indeed safe to use. So that's something, there's a journey to go through for those compliance teams. I can understand it. And of course, we've seen the previous years, right? There was the whistleblower directive. When I hear with new clients, and probably for the same for you, not everybody is finished with implementing the whistleblower directive. So if you're still struggling with that, you're not alone. So it's just like GDPR, it's an ongoing thing. And what we also see, of course, is areas where organizations have to be compliant is DORA. I think you mentioned also earlier to me that quite a number of clients are asking about DORA.
It's more that clients ask us about DORA, about how important it is that software is super secure and the data is safe.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know better than I how much certificates we have and how important it is to.
Yeah, of course. But I think the key is the trend that we see. DORA is, of course, focused on financial institutions, as resilience for digital operations. But what we often see is that when such a new regulation is being introduced, it also becomes a sort of new gold standard. Also, if you as an organization are not in financial services, but maybe you are supplying to financial services, which a lot of other organizations do as well. So there's a trickle-down effect that will make this DORA compliancy also a challenge for the next year.
Yeah.
And of course, because there are so many new regulations coming up, the question is, what are the risks, right, and challenges very practically for these compliance officers? Because there's a lot of additional work, and oftentimes there's not a lot of additional manpower to deal with all these challenges. What do you hear from your clients? How are they tackling those challenges for these organizations? And technology can help, of course, right? Especially, of course, the SpeakUp system. And I think what is interesting to understand, what type of functionalities are clients most helped with with regards to the challenges that they are being presented with from that efficiency standpoint and the data stability standpoint that you earlier introduced.
Yeah. So to look back at the supply chain challenges that we talked about before, about ESG and CSRDDD, one of the features that could help compliance officers is that in our software we can design, for instance, workflows to make mandatory workflow and to make sure that local users, local compliance officers have to fill out certain fields. So to guide them through a workflow to make sense what they're going to report on at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Also because some local officers, they're not in the SpeakUp system on a daily basis. So to help them.
So you set out predefined pathways through which users can route a specific investigation or case management process.
Yeah. Those are the biggest clients who aim to comply with the CSRDDD or already have to because they're listed or large companies. And what I always say to my clients as well, what do you need to report on? Because what you put in your system, you get out of it. So that's the fields that we configure. But also, what does your process look like? And there are some best practices and some structures, but I think what we want to do in our software is that it's super highly configurable and they can configure it in a way that fits their process.
All right. So basically, because there's the clients like the way that we set out predefined pathways that enforces all users to go through the same steps, which results in a stable data set. And from there on out, the analytics process becomes much more easy because it's already all available right there. And I think you also mentioned to me when we were having coffee yesterday that nowadays a lot of organizations really, the way that at the end of the process, data retention can be managed in an efficient way, which in the past used to be quite a lot of manual work, I would say. Is that indeed something that plays a role in making lives easier and more efficient for clients?
Yes, although I think this is already built in their practice. It's not a new thing anymore. I think on our end with our AI feature that you can auto-anonymize your data, that's a new thing and could be really helpful. Mm-hmm. But to be able to save your data in a safe and secure environment, and you know that you can set the data retention according to, and this is still a struggle for some clients, according to the EU member state you're in, that you can say in the Netherlands is different from, for instance, Hungary, that you can schedule data retentions for different purposes. Yeah. Yeah, so that's still, again, handy.
Yeah. All right, so that's the technology part, right? But what other areas play a role when we talk about strengthening mechanisms for speaking up in organizations? Because I think you are not only focusing on implementing a software, right? You help organizations in a broader fashion.
Yeah, and that's also what I really like. And sometimes maybe we forget it when there's so many new legislations and stipulations that we have to comply to as compliance officers. To zoom out a little bit, we work together with Transparency International a lot, and what they say is a whistleblowing tool still a number one fraud detector mechanism is the most important thing to have in place. So to focus on that, and also not only about the technical setup, but everything that's important, because the software is only one part of building a speak-up culture. It's about what other channels do you have? Do you have a safe culture? Do you have trainings for people if you know how to have an open dialogue with maybe a colleague who's doing something that you're not comfortable with? Can you go to HR? Are you taken seriously? But also, how is the speak-up line managed? And not from a very legal standpoint, but also try to build trust first with the reporter again, because oftentimes speak-up is a last resort channel. You can speak up anonymously, and that makes it safe for the reporter. So all these things matter, and I think when you deal with the reporter in a way that it's respectful, that you give clarity and transparency, and you handle the investigations well, this is something that you're building a reputation with in the company, and that is
very good,
super important.
Yeah, so I think all of that revolves around communication, right? Communication and awareness towards the employees in your organization or the employees in your supply chain.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the biggest risk, right? Like, if you don't communicate in the right way, doesn't matter how well you've technically set up a system, you're going to miss out on reports, right? I think there is a research about that.
Yeah, so if it's interesting also in your employee surveys to ask, do you know that we have a speak-up line in place? Because sometimes organizations don't receive reports, but you don't know why. And very often what is that they don't know where to find the communication details. It's not fear of retaliation at that point, or it's like communication is number one. When do I go to that channel?
Yeah.
What can I expect? The communication around it.
Yeah, so it's not just the fact that there's not a lot of reports doesn't mean fear of retaliation, doesn't mean we have a bad culture or people don't dare to speak up. Could also just be something similar. They don't know where to go.
Exactly.
All right.
And I think what you can also do in our system is to enter cases manually. So you can see how many reports were made through HR or maybe trust persons or other reporting channels. Because if people use those channels, which is amazing, if they're courageous enough to go there without sharing or with sharing their identity, then you don't need the last resort speak up channel. So this is a way to know, hey, what's happening in the organization? Is there a safe environment to talk about? And communication to the extent of using the right URLs, the QR codes. And there is actually something that our clients are looking for a solution now, which also leads back to communication, but also ESG. It's our clients in the fashion industry. They source from maybe one factory in, let's say, Bangladesh. Yep. They all use the same fabric. But now, under the CSRD, Triple D, and the ESG, you need to share your speak-up details at the factory all down the value chain.
Oh, that's interesting. So there are 5 speak-up channels for those people.
I can just see and imagine a big wall when, something goes wrong here in the factory. What should it be? What brand
which client or brand did I work for today? Which poster should I now use?
Where should this fabric go to? And that is also a trend I see, that the big organizations are looking to work together on this and maybe have more a speak-up system for industry-wide or value chain-wide. This is some of the struggles. But again...
But these are really interesting conversations, of course, and it's not said that there is a direct, straightforward solution for it, but it's, of course, fantastic to see that you are engaging with clients on those real practical challenges that is not only an individual client challenge, but it's actually an industry or even a regulatory challenge in itself, because the regulation is asking something from companies which is actually quite complicated to achieve.
Yeah. And I think that's the life of compliance officers in general. Like the universal challenge for compliance officers.
That's one of the actual universal challenges.
Yeah.
Earlier, we also talked about compliance teams being restricted in their resources, right? New stuff is coming to their desk. Still, though, we do see that some companies really struggle with all of this, but some companies really thrive. And I'm curious to see from your first-hand experience, where does that difference come from? Why do some companies have it so much difficult, and why do others do it so much easier? At least that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I think if you, as a compliance team, know where the board wants to go, the organization wants to go, that there are always new laws coming up anyway. You just look at society, what's important, sustainability is important, environment, AI, all this is coming our way. To take a step back and to look a little bit at the bigger picture. How can we make a strategy to really know that SpeakUp culture and these mechanisms that we're building are super important? And an illustration about this is one of the biggest puzzles and headaches for compliance officers was under the EU whistleblowing directive, where it was required to, for every legal entity over 250 employees, to set up a separate channel. What is a channel? Is that a SpeakUp software channel? Is that you go to your HR person? All these things were we just talked about amongst each other. So we put the compliance officers together and like, how do you deal with it? And
so you develop together with multiple compliance officers.
Just struggle together to
the opinion,
balance your solution.
Yeah.
Or your strategy, how to go about it.
Yeah, and I think that's really key, is to bring people together that are facing the same similar challenges, because compliance does not exist all by themselves. Every company is different, but many of the overarching challenges, they are of course the same. And that's of course great to bring people together and find solutions together. And there's not one solution. There are multiple solutions for the same problem, and this all depends on the company's appetite for risk and the company's approach toward these kind of legislation.
And a long-term commitment to a strategy, because if you know where you're going, then you're not just shaken with all the new requirements.
So this is mostly coming in the end from the board to put a very clear tip on the horizon. That's where we're going. What I hear is also important to embrace the fact that change is a continuous reality, and that you have to basically set up your compliance organization to deal with that change all the time as well. Yeah, so I think we can start to round it off. I think it was really interesting conversation, Leanne. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. So what we see is that legal developments, regulatory developments are continuous. They will be there at any point in time. It will not be over next year. There will probably be more to deal with. And we see that technology can help, especially there's a lot of promise in AI to automate in an intelligent way things that can make processes and life easier for compliance officers. But there is a risk of falling behind if your organization is not set up to adequately deal with these changes and these opportunities in an effective way. And don't lose sight over the accompanying areas. Don't only look in the technology area, but also look at those very practical things like, hey, have we clearly communicated our stuff to our employees actually? We have great programs, but do our employees know about it? And if you have an agile team with a clear vision and commitment to change, then things can likely perform better. Any final remarks for you, Leanne?
No. No, just that it's fun. It's always inspiring to talk to compliance officers and to be that sort of knowledge broker that I know that they need, because it's not that black and white. So I hope that with these podcasts and webinars, we continue to also help.
Absolutely.
To make their lives easier.
Great. Well, thank you for your time today. And thank you for the audience for listening in. We look very much forward to see you at the next podcast.